Welcome to episode 36 of Created by Design. I have a lot of things to bring today. I've got so many projects completed, some partially completed, some new things, and I'm also thinking about the new year and what I want to be involved with and work on in 2023. I always have to have projects out there in front of me. I think I work best that way. Being retired has slowed us down quite a bit. COVID has slowed us all down. It's still around. And then just regular flu season. So we still find ourselves kind of hanging close to home and not a number of large groups to get together in, or even small groups. I do participate in a knitting group every Wednesday with a few dear friends, and so that gets me out. And then, of course, church on Sunday. And but I like having things to think about and my brain to be contemplating, and so I've always got a lot of stuff running up there, and trying to pick and choose what really is going to bring me value, what might be helpful to somebody else, and just what I enjoy doing. I think that's so important. We've talked about that in times past, of finding something that you enjoy doing. We all have some giftings and some creativity, and sometimes we just need that unlocked. We don't see it in ourselves necessarily, but I think in my 78, soon to be 79 years, I have found that it's part of really our valuing ourselves is finding what we enjoy doing, and it doesn't have to be grandiose. So just sometimes just the smallest thing gives us a feeling of accomplishment. It helps us identify our own value, and often our gifting is a way to reach out to others. And I think there's just such a healing thing in when we can do something kind for somebody else. So those are just some of the things that run through my mind. I wanted to give you an update on my little or newest, I should say, critter, which is for a new great granddaughter expected in April. Put little ballerina booties on her. She's got some cute little detail on her breeches. I did follow the pattern. I think this is the pattern clothing for the mouse, and I out of the first book of Louise Crowthers, and I of course modified it a bit. You know, that's the beauty of those patterns. Make them the way the pattern says a few times, and then, branch off and use your own yarn. I see that a lot of you are doing that when I go on the Facebook site for the Knitted Animal Friends, and it's really a lot of fun to see what everybody is doing. I may end up making a little hat for her yet. I don't know. I've got time. The baby's not due until April, but she was fun to do, and it's always fun when you've got a little person in mind that you know that you're making it for. So that's my catch up on her. I had just started her on our last episode, so she's pretty well done, and yeah, fun to make. So that's catching up on her completed project. So that was fun. And then in this episode, I'm going to be inserting a picture of my Christmas tree. I've posted it on Facebook, but some of you don't see me there. And I'll post a picture right in the next screen here. So of my Christmas tree, and it's just all my critters, not all of them that I've made, but many of them, and bows. And so it was kind of fun. I've gotten a lot of interest off of my Christmas tree, probably one of a kind at this point in time. So I'll show you a picture of that. And then my next thing that I have gotten involved with, this is one of those projects I've been thinking about for a while. Every year I always have some knitted items that I give to a women's shelter. And it's a shelter, I think it's actually Union Gospel Mission here in Oregon, and it is a shelter where women can come and stay up to 2 years. They work on rehabilitation. Some of them actually have children with them, and so they're there for short and sometimes the full 2 years. So I've given a number of knitted items and donated other things to that throughout the year, and I just thought 2023 I wanted to start right away in January working on something that by the end of the year I would have enough done for everybody. There's usually around 15 or 20 women there, not counting the children that may be there. So I got watching on YouTube. Actually, it was Fruity Knitting. You've heard me talk about Fruity Knitting. And they did an episode this last month on Newfoundland and a knitting event that they went to there. And it all got shut down because there was hurricane. And so they were without electricity for a long time, and the whole knitting week didn't happen. But she did get some interviews in, and one of the interviews was these ladies with saltwater socks. And it just caught my eye. Their story is so interesting. There's not just knitting patterns in this book, but in the front of the book, a whole little history about the socks in Newfoundland. I find it so interesting, very intrigued with how knitting has affected so many countries around the world. You've heard me talk about that before. I had no idea how knitting and wool and making socks really, they played such a big part in making of these socks. I mean, they made 60-some thousand hand knitted, the people on the island. It was a big deal. So that history, it intrigues me. You don't have to look too far back and find a lot of little countries. The UK, wool and knitting was a huge factor. It still is big in their country. The US used to have a lot more sheep raising, used to process a lot more wool. And it's a long story, but we don't do that anymore. It's not a big part of our country any longer, which in a way is kind of sad. But we, for the most part, have to go outside of the U.S. We do have some yarns. More companies are coming online, small companies, with making yarn, and they have beautiful yarn, but it's not bigger quantities. The price is usually pretty expensive, but I've worked with some lovely yarns from the U.S. The yarn that came with the saltwater socks that they worked with was actually from a sheep grown in Newfoundland, and it was a sturdy fiber, and that's why these socks, because it's so cold, that these socks became so important to the fishermen there, and just people in general, because of the very severe weather. And they even talked about often they wore 2 pairs of socks. So I thought, what a fun thing to do. I'll show you a picture here of some of the fun socks. They're colorful, they caught my eye, and I'm looking at them take my little notes off of here. I'm looking at them for making slipper socks, because here in Oregon, we have cold weather, but if I can get that in the camera correctly, but to wear heavy socks, unless you're up skiing, we don't, but we do wear socks. But I thought, well, slipper socks would be fun. And when I say a slipper sock, I just mean a heavier sock that maybe, it might even be a little looser on your foot. It's heavier than what you would want to necessarily put down in a boot, meant to be worn around the house in the wintertime. A lot of us have hardwood floors, and so those socks become more important to us. So this was my first sample that I actually made, and they call them vamps. And this is just some leftover Aryan weight yarn that I had. It's really not sock yarn. Hold it up here closer. I think this is done on a size 7 needle, but I just wanted to see how fast it would go together, and I got to tell you, they're a lot faster than knitting than my sock yarn is, for sure, which is kind of fun. I was looking for something that would be easy knit, not be a long project. I could work it in between making some of my little knitted animal friends and some of the other things that I do. And so I got serious and I made another pair, and I happen to have, this is some alpaca and wool from Peru, and it does have a little bit of nylon, so it does work well for socks. This is just for myself, because I wanted to make another sample pair. And the nice thing about these socks, pick it up here, as you can see, they're double strand of yarn, because you're working with 2 colors at one time, and so they really are quite cushiony. This is a top down. I made this actually to the pattern of the Saltwater socks. These are a little bit big on me, but it really was my sample. But I got to tell you, they're so comfortable, and because the sole is done a knit 1, purl 1, carrying the yarn over, it's double thickness there also. So these are nice and toasty warm, easy to slip on and off, a little above the ankle. And I thought, wow, these are fun to make. I'm going to make more of these. I'm going to make some of these for the women's shelter. So typically I do not particularly like to do the heel flap. It's actually pretty easy, but what I really love to do is that sweet tomato heel, and by Kat Brody. And so I thought, so how do I take those 2 patterns, and it's a toe up sock, the sweet tomato heel sock is. It can be done top down, but I like to do toe up. So I thought, you know, I'm going to match those 2 patterns together. And so this is my first sock that I'm actually working on doing a pattern out of the design out of the Saltwater book, but I did a toe up sock and casting it on 2 needles, so there's no seam there. It just you've seen me talk about socks before. So I'm incorporating the idea of the Saltwater sock in with the Kat Brody, and there's going to be some fun stripes up at the top. That's the one thing that I noticed about the Saltwater socks. They're bright, they're fun. Having bright colors was important to them as I was reading through the book. I think they have long winters, gray days. They're out in the open seas, basically, that island is. And so color, I think, was very important to them. And I just think it makes them look fun. So that's what I'm doing now, is working on my interpretation, taking ideas of Kat Brody's and the Saltwater sock gals. But I highly recommend this book, and not all of them are made out of a heavy gauged yarn. They have a number of socks in here that are nice weight wool, and not fingerling, but sock weight, typical sock weight yarn, which is a little bit heavier than a fingerling. So there's a lot of different ideas in this book, but the ones that really caught my eye were these heavier socks that could be worn like slipper socks. I wear slippers around the house, excuse me, but when I'm sitting in my chair or curled up on the couch, I don't want my slippers on. And so I want something on my feet. And that's probably a sign of old age, but I'm going with it. And so I love to have fun socks. So that's what I'm working on 2023. And so the important thing for me was to have a good yarn that was going to be washable, because people don't want you to give them something that, okay, this is a pair of socks that I may wear all the time and may need a lot of cleaning, and I don't want to have to wash them by hand and lay them out flat to dry. So I was able to find, you probably all recognize, this is from Peru. It's called Ultra Wool. Show you the label there. This is a washable yarn, and it is can be thrown in the dryer. I'm sure not super hot heat, but it can take washing and drying in the dryer. 100% wool. It feels really nice. It's got a nice squishy feel. It's soft, and yet there's a nice twist to it, but it's not hard. It's just a nice, be nice on your feet kind of yarn. And it came in a lot of colors. That was my other criteria for when I was going to choose a yarn. And I got this from Webb's, WEBBS, and I didn't look up the price of it, but they have quite a nice discount. It was cheaper than I could buy in the box stores here in Portland, by ordering it through Webb's. And even with postage, because yarn does not weigh very much. And so I think I got about 9-10 different colors, because I like being able to open up the bin and say, today I feel like working with turquoise and gray. I like choices. It makes it fun. And so I've got a number of different bright colors to work with to make these socks be fun socks. On this sock, the back side, the sole side, is nice and smooth, and I'm doing just a super simple design on the front that will go all the way up and carry through to the top. And actually at the top of the sock, it's going to be striped, so it will not be a subtle sock. It will be bright. They're meant to be bright and fun. And I'm working with Flexi Flip size 7, works really well. So these are a fast knit. I like that. I like that idea of a fast knit. So that's my one project for 2023, even though I've actually started it in 2022. I was anxious to get it started when that yarn came 2 days ago. So that's one thing that's going to keep me busy. Next, I'm going to insert in this video is an update on Carrie's backyard. Yes, it's winter time and we've had some snow, and she has some things that she has put in the ground, because that's what you're supposed to do with them. And so right here I'm going to do, it's just a short insert about her backyard. So I hope you enjoy that.
Okay, so today I'm going to give you an update on what's happening in my garden. I think the last update was showing the commercial garden fabric that I had laid down as some weed barrier in my garden. I have put some soil in these first 3 beds. I actually thought all 4 of these larger beds would be filled up. The purpose of these beds is to grow ranunculus flowers. You may know them as buttercups, but they are ranunculus. And there's 3 different colors that I have. And like I said, a 4th one was not able to be delivered due to supply issues with the supplier that I ordered from. So I should have plenty of the other 3 colors. I'm really excited to see what happens with them. These are very cold hardy plants, so you can overwinter them. And they should be ready for harvesting around probably March and April of 2023. I've been holding off getting them in the ground just because it's been a little bit cold here. We are in Oregon, we've had some freezing temperatures, and so I didn't want to put these in the ground until I knew I had frost cloth coming, which I get on Wednesday, and then I'll be able to cover with the frost cloth. It's basically a layer of fabric that you can protect your beds and hold some warmth in and protect these young plants. So what I'll do is I'll show you what they look like. This is a corm. It's obviously been sitting in dirt. This is the tray that I've been pre-sprouting in, and actually these are the three colors. So I have a salmon, orange, and yellow, and these are markers to show me where in my tray I have the different colors sitting. But I've been pre-sprouting inside of this tray for probably about 3 weeks, and this is a good example of what it looks like. The corm, I soaked them before I put them in the tray of dirt, and you can see some new growth coming out on this one. Clearly not the same amount as some of these other corms. This is the salmon color. But they've been sitting in the tray and developing this root system to do their pre-sprouting, and now I can get them in the ground. So this is an example of some green coming out, but lots and lots of roots. So I'm excited about that. And so today I'm going to put these in each bed. You plant them about 6 inches apart, and then just let them be. I'm going to have to be very careful with extra moisture, which is where that frost cloth will come in handy, because you don't want them to get so wet that they mold. And that's been one of the things I've been careful about as I've been pre-sprouting, so that they did not mold inside this tray. They do, once they're established, they're supposed to handle the water fairly well, but I will keep them covered so they don't have a lot of standing water on them during this winter growing season. So that gives you an idea of what has been going on in my garden, and I will continue to give updates and show how these corms start developing into an actual plant and start growing more root systems and height on them as they get closer to spring.
So I hope you enjoyed that update about Carrie's backyard. She's taken on quite a big project, and it's going to be interesting and fun to watch her backyard grow. And we'll just periodically give you a quick little update as to what's happening. So with 2023 in mind, I decided that I am going to do a journal for 2023. It's been several years since I've done a journal. Used to do them all the time. And then maybe because of COVID, I just felt there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. And I just was so busy with knitting. But I'm ready to do another journal. I'll show you a couple of the journals. Well, first I'll show you the journal book that I've chosen. It's a great book. It is made by, you would think, oh, this is Moleskin. Barnes and Noble have them. I also, a number of stores, art stores have them, and I'm sure you can get them on Amazon. But I love this one because it's got the grids in it. And that just makes it fun. It's little dots that make the grid. And so every page has that grid, and I've worked with the moleskin before, and some of them I've made very elaborate. This one's not going to be so elaborate. I'm probably going to only use ink pens and colored pencils in it. But give you an idea, this one is from 2017, and this is very elaborate. I made papers and painted them and then glued them on. And every year, or not every year, but most every year, I kind of think about a word that is maybe something that's going through my mind at the time or has meaning to me. And for 2017, it was the word hope. And that just kind of ran through my thinking for the month, or the year, not just the month. But it was kind of a significant word. Hope is still a good word, by the way. And but I thought about it throughout the year and just saw different ways that it was significant for that year particularly. Here's another one of my papers that I made, and I'm not going to be doing that, but every month I made a divider, and this one's bright, and then have, of course, pages designated for the month that I not always wrote in every day, but often did. And so that's one of my journals. Another one that's similar, that actually I started first, this is the year of my 70th, the year I turned 70, 2014. And I did just a lot of, I'm not an artist. I just doodle. Doodling is my my thing. I got into making Celtic knots that year, and but I also often would make out the whole month. I would draw it out and write in that each day, and see if I can find a page where I did that in, the month of July I did. So I would draw out the calendar, and this is another book that has the grid in it, and so that makes it kind of fun. Here's the third one I will show you. See what year this is. 2015, and you can see I made tabs for each month, did a little more doodling in this particular one. Some of that is Zentangle, is there's books out there called Zentangle, a gal that has made those. Here's some of my doodling. The problem with doodling is you have to put the knitting needles down long enough to do it. But it's very therapeutic. And for some reason, I just felt that this year, 2023, was a good year to do a little more journaling. So we'll see where that goes. And but I have fun with that. And I got to tell you, today when I was going through these and deciding which ones to show, so much fun to open them up and look back and read some of your notes and see some things that were significant in your life that was going on. And I hadn't looked at them for a while, and so that was kind of fun today to just flip through the pages and be reminded of events that were happening and some of my thoughts. And so this will be an ongoing, I might show you some of it as we go through the year. I don't know. We'll see where I go with that. But that's what I'm going to do in 23, just for something a little different. And I'm going to think about a word, be intentional about that for 2023. And have no idea what that word's going to be. I've got a few days before 23 gets here, and so I'll let you know what the word is that kind of sits in my heart and my brain, and I'll let you know what that word for 2023 is going to be. It'll be a surprise to me too. So that's going to make 2023 kind of busy. I'm going to be doing journaling and making socks. I'll still be making some critters. I had to put that out of the way because now I'm going to talk about the knitted animal friends and the little toe cap tennis shoe. I made it here for my little chimpanzee that I did a few months ago, and this is the little tennis shoe that we're talking about. And I've had several people ask me questions about the tennis shoe. This one's made differently. This is the one in the second book, and the first book they're done very differently. Actually, this one's kind of nice and tidy, maybe fits even a little better than the first tennis shoe. But where people are having questions about is there's to be picked up some stitches right through here after it's been cast off. So you can see this one's not done. The tongue is not on the shoe. So I made this up to talk about on here. So the tongue actually is up here under the lace. So the tongue has not been added to this one here. Also, this, I could just take this tennis shoe off of him, but I did the sole on this shoe the method in which it is in the first book. Now, I knit in the round. Her patterns are for knitting flat, and then you sew it up the back. Well, if you've been listening to me very long, you know I don't like to do seams when I don't have to, and knitting in the round works the best for me. But when I did this latest sample, I followed exactly like she did in the book. In other words, it has the ribbing on the sole, where this is all knitted. Oh, that's out of focus here. Get it pulled back so the camera. So it's flat. It's all. This is all knit. So what you do in the pattern for doing it as she said, if you want have the knit and purl ridges, if you were knitting this in the flat, you knit every row. Well, when we knit in the round, you can't knit every row and get those ridges. So wherever it says it's a total knit row, like I think row 1 says to knit, that's a purl. So now I'm going to do a little demonstration that hopefully will help those of you that are working on the tennis shoe. I've had quite a few people ask me about, this is the toe cap sneaker. This is the sneaker that is in book 2 of the Knitted Animal Friends. The tennis shoe or the sneaker that was in book 1 was made a little differently. And where the questions are coming up is about picking up purl bumps in this little area right here. So I'm going to go through that. I had thought that this next tennis shoe that I do, or the next shoe, I would be trying what somebody suggested instead of going down and picking up the 4th row. And if you've read the pattern, you know what I'm talking about. And they're actually doing running stitch or a satin stitch. I'm not quite sure what stitch they're doing. I thought I was going to do that on this shoe, and I thought, no, I'm going to do it just like the book said, because if you notice, this is the shoe that I made for the chimp, and I knit in the round, so I've changed up her shoe pattern. She does it flat, and then she has a seam that she sews up across here and up the back. Well, I've eliminated that seam, and I'll show you how I cast that on. I've done it before in other tutorials, but I'll do a quick reminder. And then I knitted it like the typical shoe in book 1. This shoe I'm going to do pretty much like she says in the pattern, and I'm on page 106 at the toe cap sneaker. And on this you can see she's got the nice ridges. And when you're knitting in the round, you're knitting every row. Well, you can't get these ridges if you're knitting every row. So what you do is you cast on your stitches, and I'm going to walk you through that. And then the very first row, it says knit. Well, you're going to take that knit row, and it's row 1, row 3, row 5. It's the odd number row. You're going to purl it. If you're knitting in the round, So you've got one row that you're doing in the knit, which I use is where you add a stitch or add the stitches, do the increases, and then the next row in her pattern book it says knit one row. Well, that knit one row turns into a purl row if you're knitting in the round. I hope that makes sense. If you're not knitting in the round, that instruction won't make any sense to you. But I wanted to get that look that she had and just see what that little shoe looked like. And then I've knitted it all the way through to, I'll look over here to what row I'm on. Well, actually all the way through row 25. And at row 25 you do the cast off, and then you're ready to pick up these stitches and do the tongue. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, but first I'm going to go back and we're going to cast on and show you this part of the sole. I've done it before, but it's slick. It never hurts to go back because some of you maybe haven't seen some of those earlier tutorials. Okay, here I'm sitting with 2 needles, and I use the flexi flips, but you can do it with 2 circular needles or 1 long circular needle, or straight double pointed needles. I have the flexi flips. Okay, I'm going to put my yarn right between those 2 needles. I'm going to hold them tight together, and right where the yarn is between the needle there, I've got the tail on the front side. The tail is coming towards me. My live yarn is in the back of the 2 needles. I'm going to take that live yarn and we're going to do a figure 8 with it. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to put it between the 2 needles, up over the top, back down between the 2 needles. Now I'm coming back up towards myself on the bottom needle. I'm going to come back in between those 2 needles. So you're just doing a figure 8, and we're to cast on 24 stitches. Well, that's 12 stitches on each, or 12 loops or stitches, they'll end up being a stitch on each needle. So just back and forth, trying to go a little slower, so you, and notice I'm kind of securing it here with my finger so they don't slip off. I'm not counting, but I'll stop here in a minute and count and see where we are. I'll do that right now. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10, and I'm counting the loops on the top. 10, 11, 12. Now there's 12 loops on the top. My yarn is hanging down here at the bottom, but in order to knit these, I've got to get my yarn, my live yarn, up to the top. So I'm going to make 1 more wrap on that bottom needle. Now my yarn is here behind my top needle, and that's what I'm going to start knitting with. If you counted the loops on the bottom, there's going to be 13. We have 12 on the top, 13 on the bottom. Don't worry about that. It's all going to take care of itself in a minute. Now I'm scooting them so they're closer to the end, and this bottom needle, I'm not going to be knitting off of it right at the moment, so I'm actually going to pull it to where the cable is, and going to get this ready to knit with. I did secure this so it didn't come unraveled. I'm going to pick up my needle, and we're going to knit across that top row. This is still part of the cast on. I guess I don't need my needle stuck in that little shoe right there, do I? And this is always awkward to hold my hands out here to knit, so I don't know how well I do with that, but we will just knit across that top row. You knit into it and slip it off. So just consider this part of the cast on. We're actually not doing the top of the first row yet. You might be able to have purled that top. I don't know. I just slipped that off and didn't get it knitted. There. So I'm just going the top stitch, and I'll see if I can show this better. So you can see the crisscross right there. I'm just going under that top needle and going right through there, just like that was a real stitch. We're making it a real stitch. And this is one of those places that you just want to take your time with, because you do want your cast on to be secure. You don't want it so tight that your needle won't slip. I knit continental, so if you are throwing your yarn, you might have to adapt these instructions just a little bit. But you're just knitting into that top row of stitches. Now this is where our yarn ends. So kind of hold it with your thumb, a little secure there. And that's our last stitch. I'm actually going to take that needle away. And now I'm going to scoot my stitches all to this end, and I'm going to give this a cartwheel turn. By that I mean turn it this way. So now the needle that was on the bottom is now on the top. And here is our little loop where we started casting on. This is our live yarn, and let's count the loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the 13th, and it's just a loop. So we take it undone. Now we have 12. So now we're going to knit across these just like we did on this bottom needle. So I'm going to take the bottom needle and pull it to my cable. You don't have to do that, but it just loosens things up and makes those stitches easier to knit into. So we're going to knit across these 12 stitches. So you knit into it and just slip it off the needle, just as in normal knitting. And this is eliminating the seam that you would be making if you knitted this flat. So this becomes, and I do the toe when I'm knitting socks. This is how I do the toe of a sock. The very, very same way with that figure 8 cast on. There may be a name for it. I don't know what that name is. So I call it a figure 8 cast on. So here we are. That is the center part right here of that shoe. And now row 1 says, we're ready for row 1, and it says knit. Well, remember, I just said in knitting in the round, if I knit this row, it's going to be flat like this. We want the ridges. So we have to purl. So every knit row, every other knit row, I should say, becomes a purl row. So we're going to purl that, and then we're going to knit what it says to do in row 2, and then row 3 will become a purl row. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back to the video as soon as I have that done, and I will actually go all the way through to the very to this point where we well, I think you know how to do this. This is just where I've added the white yarn. So I don't even know that you need me to come back and do that particularly. Well, I might, because maybe you carry your yarn all the way around the white yarn when you come to this part here. And the blue is so dark, it shows through just a tiny bit, but that doesn't bother me. Otherwise, you are going to do intarsia. And I thought, you know what, this is a little knitted critters tennis shoe. I'm not going to do intarsia on this. I'm just going to carry my yarn all the way around. And so that's what I'm going to do, obviously, on the mate to this. And then I'll get that knitting done and come back and we'll pick up the stitches right here and do the tongue, which is where really most of the questions are. But I just wanted to show you what you do, how you get those ridges when you're knitting in the round. You have to make every other row a purl row. Okay, we are at row 1 of the tongue, and it tells us to pick up those 5 pesky little purl bumps that are hidden right back here on the top of on the back side of where we did a cast off here. So I've picked up 4. Now this is a little fiddly for sure. I find using this little tool or another knitting needle. In this case, I kind of cheat. Let's see if I can get this around here so the camera can pick up what I'm looking at. So this is the next little purl bump. It's actually one of the blue. These were all white, but this is now one of the blue. And I'm just going in under that purl with the back side of my pointy little tool here. And this end, of course, has the crochet hook on it. So I'm just pulling that loop through. This is probably kind of cheating, but it sure makes picking those up a lot easier. There are my 5 stitches. This is what we are going to start working with. And it tells us that's row 1 of the tongue. And then row 2 is we're going to purl those 5 stitches. So you're going to be purling back and then just continue to do what it says to do, picking up the purl bump. And I know that's kind of hard, especially if you're kind of new to knitting or haven't done anything like this, but here's your little purl bump right back here. And that's what they're referring to pick up, is that little purl bump on that stitch right under the cast off. So if you follow exactly what she says to do at that point in time, it works. But finding those little purl bumps, I realize for some is like, okay, what are we looking at here? What really is that purl bump? And the goal is to make little stitches out of them, and then we finish off the tongue. And I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think you need me to actually knit the tongue. I'm going to be doing that and finishing this little tennis shoe off. It has some yarn overs and to make the little eyelet bump for the shoelace to go through, but that's pretty simple. And that shoe turns out really nicely for then putting our little shoelace in. And so once you get the idea of where the purl bump is and what to pick up, it becomes pretty self-explanatory. Now that when I did the cast off on this shoe, I did it in the white right here. I didn't actually carry the blue all the way through. So I do have a little white ridge where this one doesn't. I did the cast off in the blue. You could do it either way. It doesn't make any difference. So that's how the little shoe works. I hope that helps you for those that had some questions about it. And in this shoe, I did the intarsia for the tongue. I did not, or for the toe. In this one, I just carried the yarn all the way around, and it needs to be steamed out so that smooths out. I can't say that I would carry it at again for another pair. I think maybe you do it in the intarsia method here, so I'm not having to carry it all the way around, the blue around also. Probably like the looks of this one better. That's just something to think about. It's a shoe for a little knitted animal, so do we get too picky? I don't think we need to. But anyhow, it's fun to try different things, and then you decide, well, which one do I like the best? That's the beauty. We get to do them how we like. I think either one of these soles work. I do want to make one of the pairs, like I was saying, where that nice, I didn't bring a pair of those little shoes in with me that has the nice little ridge. I like that shoe. It has a nice structure to it, a little harder to do. But there you go. Hopefully that's helpful to you. We're getting ready for Christmas around here. I'm sure you are too. And I hope you have a beautiful holiday. Hope you have family and friends around you. So blessings, and we'll connect in January. Bye now. Please hit like and share if you're enjoying these episodes. I'm enjoying doing them, and I appreciate all of you that are watching and all the questions. It makes it fun. And I'm almost at 1,000 followers. So if you've never hit the subscribe to following and you would like to do that, I would appreciate it. I'm almost at 1,000, and I would love to hit 1,000 by the end of the year. We're close. Little ways to go, but thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Bye now.